Hello everyone, this is Ravindar Dundra and welcome back to my channel. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about class 9th CBSE Economics chapter number 3, that is poverty as a challenge. In the previous lectures about this chapter, we were discussing about what is poverty and how it exists both in rural areas as well as in urban areas. And we have also discussed how this poverty is seen by the social scientists. So in that we have discussed about social exclusion as well as this vulnerability. Then we have also seen the present number of people who are living in poverty. So today we will discuss the next topic, that is poverty line. So what do you mean by this poverty line? So poverty line basically it's an imaginary line to measure the poverty, or you can say to measure the number of people who are living in poverty. But how do we measure this poverty? Is that there is a common method which we use to measure this poverty. So that common method is based on the income or consumption levels of a person. So basically poverty line is an imaginary line, and how do we get that imaginary line is that by depending upon income or consumption levels of a person. For example, there will be a minimum level of income, there will be a minimum level of consumption. So if the minimum level is not crossed, means we consider those people as this who are living under this poverty. For example, you take, there should be a minimum level of income for that person. So if he is not able to get that income, then we can consider that as a poverty. Then at the same time we can also take this consumption levels, where the consumption varies from person to person, but there is a minimum level of consumption where if the person is not able to get that minimum level of consumption, then we can consider them as this poverty. So here in India, mostly the method which we use is either by income or this consumption levels. And this poverty line, whatever the imaginary line we are using, it may vary with the time and place. That means depending upon the places, depending upon the time, it may change from place to place as well as time to time. So for example, if you take USA, so in USA if you take not having car is considered as something like a poverty, whereas in India if you take the same situation, if a person owns any car, we consider it as a luxury item. So you can see the difference existing between USA as well as India. So if a person is not having car in USA is considered as poverty, whereas if a person having car in India is considered something like a luxury. So here you can find the differences from place to place as well as time to time. So let us see how we measure the poverty in India. So at present in India, we use food requirements in order to measure this poverty. And how do we estimate this food requirement is that by using something known as this calorie requirements. That means at an average how many calories are required for a person in order to live or in order to lead a minimum standard of living. So what is the minimum requirement of the calories? That if you take the accepted average calorie requirement is 2400 calories per person per day in the rural areas, as well as if you take cities, it is required somewhere around 2100 calories in the urban areas per person per day. So that means at an average a person who is living in the rural areas, he should have at least consumed 2400 calories of food, and at the same time in the cities it should be 2100 calories. And why does this difference exist between rural areas as well as urban areas is that in rural areas you see people doing most of the physical work, maybe in the fields or maybe in the other works. So for that physical requirements, or you can say for the physical work, they need more calories compared to these cities. So that is the reason why people who are living in rural areas require more calories compared to this urban areas. So next we will see in the based on this income levels how we can measure the poverty in India. Let us discuss about the poverty line based on this income. So just now we have seen how when we consider a person as a poverty by seeing this consumption levels. So now we will discuss based on the income levels, and these income levels are according to the data given by the government, that is from 2011 and 12. So according to 2011 and 12, the income levels required for a person to qualify, or to, we can say whether he is living above poverty line or below poverty line, is measured. So for example, if you take this poverty line for a person, it was fixed at 816 rupees per person per month in the rural areas. That means at an average a person should need 816 rupees per month in order to qualify as living above this poverty line, or you can say having not coming under the poverty. Then if you take this next one, that is urban areas, a person requires at least 1000 rupees per person per month in the urban areas. So why this difference exists? In rural areas it is only 816 rupees, again in urban areas it is 1000 rupees. So the reason is that in urban areas the cost of living is very higher, so therefore we can say that the more there is a more requirement of money in the urban areas. So people who have a person who is not having 1000 rupees per month, we consider him as a below poverty line person, or you can say he is living under poverty, whereas in urban areas he should at least have 816 rupees per month in the rural areas, so that he will be considered as above poverty line, or else he will also be considered as a poverty. Then if you take a family of 5 members who are living, so they require at least 4080 rupees per month in the rural areas. That means 816 into 5, and if you take in urban areas, they at least require 5000 rupees per month in order to qualify above poverty line. So that is how we compare the people whether they are living under poverty or above poverty by using these income levels. Then who will calculate this poverty? At what time we calculate is that this poverty is basically carried, or you can say calculated by an organization by doing surveys, and this organization name is this National Sample Survey Organization, and for every 5 years this organization will estimate the poverty, and at the same time will revise the income requirements as well as calorie requirement in order to measure this poverty. And if you take the worldwide institutions, maybe for developed or developing countries or underdeveloped countries, the World Bank also measures the poverty by using these dollars. And what is the minimum requirement of dollars in order to come above the poverty line is that it is $1.9 per day per person. That means if a person is earning $1.9 per day, then we can consider him as above poverty line, or you can say he is not living under poverty line. And if he is not able to get at least $1.9 per day, means we can consider him as below poverty line, or he is living under poverty line. So next we will see the poverty estimates. Now if you can see the poverty estimates over the last 2 or 3 decades, we can find that in India the poverty is slowly started decreasing. For example, you take in the years 1993 and 94, it was somewhere around 45%, and now in 2004 and 5 the percentage is somewhere around 37.2%, and in 2011 and 12 it is estimated that 22% of the people are living under poverty. And in the upcoming years, that means at present, maybe in 2020, it may be even lesser than 20%. So what we can understand from this is that over the past 2 or 3 decades, if you can see the table here, you can find that the poverty, the percentage of people who are living under poverty is slowly started coming down. But there are still some of the groups whom we consider them as the vulnerable groups who are still on the edge of this poverty. So let us see who are these vulnerable groups and how they are facing this challenge of poverty. Now discuss about these vulnerable groups. So who are these vulnerable groups? Are basically those people who are in the verge of falling into poverty, or you can simply say those people who are in the danger zone of falling into the line of below poverty. So let us see who are these groups. So according to this, we can classify them into 2 different groups, that is social groups as well as this economic groups. So if we can classify these social groups, we can consider 2 important groups in the country who are in the danger zone of falling into poverty. So one is this scheduled caste and the other one is this scheduled tribes. So in short, we also call them as SCs or STs. So due to some of the historical reasons, we can say that these social groups, that is scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, they are in the danger zone of falling into poverty, because since times from the history they are excluded from the main society. So that is one reason. Then if you take the other group of people, that is the economic group, so here under the economic group you can find the people who are in rural agricultural households, and at the same time the next one is this urban casual labor. So in rural we can find people who are who are not having any kind of land, or you can say agricultural laborers, and at the same time in urban areas you can take these casual laborers who work for construction activities. So these groups are also in the danger zone of falling into poverty. And there are some groups like scheduled castes and scheduled tribes whom we can consider they are having some double disadvantages. So one is being the what we can say being SCs and STs, and the other one is these groups only, they don't have mostly any kind of land and they work as a casual workers or casual laborers. So from this what we can understand is that there are some vulnerable groups, or you can say there are some groups in the country who are always in the living on the edge of this poverty. So chances are there they may fall into this poverty line very quickly. So who are those? Again, if you see this scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, as well as people who are working as rural agricultural workers, and at the same time this urban casual labor. And apart from that, sometimes apart from these social groups and economic groups, within the family also sometimes this inequality exists. So how it exists is that some family members, they don't get equal access to the resources, or you can say income, or you can take food. For example, within the family women might not be able to get equal access to the resources, then the elderly people, and at the same time you can also take this female infants. So such type of groups such as women, elder people, female infants, so within the family also they'll face some kind of inequality, or they don't get the equal access to the resources. So from this what we can consider is that if you can see in the graph, mostly those people who are coming under this vulnerable groups are this scheduled castes as well as this scheduled tribes. So in the next lectures we will discuss about the next topic, that is interstate disparities. Thank you.